Okay, so if y is this function, f of x equals x squared plus 5x minus 6, we saw this expression in one of the problems we just did. The first one of the two problems we did in the last video. Quadratic formula tells us that well, first of all, y equals 0 if and only if x squared plus 5x minus 6 equals 0, because this is equal to y, and y is equal to this. So if one of these is 0, the other is 0, right? That's all this means. If this is 0, then this is 0, and if this is 0, then this is 0, okay? Now, this is just a quadratic equation with a equal 1, b equals 5, c equals -6. And we did this just a few minutes ago. So y equals 0 if and only if x is this expression. Just plug into the quadratic formula. And you got to, of course, know the quadratic formula. And I think we wrote it out just a minute ago, but maybe not. Let's see. Where in the world is what I just did a minute ago? There it is. Okay, well, I didn't write it out, and I'm not going to write it out now. I wrote it out last time, but it's all over the place. Look up the quadratic formula and try to remember, so you don't have to keep looking it up. So, plugging in, we get this. It's easily simplified to this or this, which gives us x equals 1 or x equals 6. Okay? Now, the graph. Of f of x. And this is going to be a big deal pretty soon in your course, okay? A couple of weeks in my course, Mr. Gallagher's in-class course might have gotten there already, because his book is set up a little bit, that's why I wanted to get to this. Okay, the graph of f of x contains the points, well, let's do this. So, (1, 0) and (-6, 0) are on the graph of f of x, which of course is this, okay? So we can put those points, we mark those points. 1, 0 would be maybe here. And if that's 1, this is maybe (-6) here. So there's 1, 0 and (-6, 0), okay? Another thing is, what is f of 0? Well, you plug 0 in for x, right? You get 0 squared plus 5 times 0 minus 6. What's that come out to? That equals (-6). And we can say y equals, y is f of 0 then. F equals 0, y is (-6). Very easy, you can just see that because any multiplication by 0 is going to give you 0 and it only leaves you with a (-6). Still good to write this out until you're convinced. Okay, when x equals 0, y equals (-6). So the point 0, (-6) is on the graph. So let's just say, oh, put 0, (-6) here. Actually, I don't want to put it that low. I'll put (-6) up here. I don't have to have an equal scale, although it's often a good idea to have one. Okay? Now, what else do I know about this graph? Well, this graph is a parabola. Okay. Now, from what we did the very first day, very first week, this is the extended basic squaring function, okay? And the shape of that graph, you will recall, is kind of like this. Make sense? Let's make a table, y equals x squared. -2, -1, -1/2, 0, 1, half, 1, 2. Y values 4, 0, 1, 4, 0, 1, 4, 1, 2, 4, 1, 4. Okay, so it's got to be this. So you got to have this shape that fits these points. Tells you one thing, this isn't the low point, because if this is a low point, this thing will be lopsided, right? Where's the low point going to be? Well, this thing is symmetric. About, well, the basic squaring function is symmetric about the y-axis. Okay? This function is not symmetric about the y-axis. It's got to go through these points. No function symmetric about the y-axis can go through these points. The low point would be on the y-axis. The axis of symmetry is halfway between the zeros because of the symmetry. Whatever happens on this side is the same as what happens on this side. So wherever the axis of symmetry is, this has to be as far on one side of the axis of symmetry as this does on the other. This means that the axis of symmetry has to be a vertical line halfway between these points. So we come halfway between -1 and -6, and it's going to be like maybe about here. It's halfway between the zeros. The zeros are here. Okay? Well, zeros at 1 and -6. You just add 1 and -6, divide by 2, and you get the number halfway between. When you add two numbers and divide by 2, you get the number halfway between. So this is where x equals -5/2. And now you know how to draw a curve. Have it come down here, have a low point here, and it's going to look like this. You've taken the x squared graph, you've shifted it left 5/2 units, and you've lowered it some number of units that we'll talk about later. Okay? Here's the quadratic formula. Well, here it is, right? You know where that -5/2 lives? This number divided by this number is your axis of symmetry. Tells you how far you've got to move that graph one way or another. It's here because it's halfway between what you get when you add the 7 and when you subtract the 7 in the numerator. Halfway between a number plus 7 and that number minus 7 is that number. So this is kind of a big deal, and it's worth understanding this because the first big stumbling block in pre-calculus is really quadratic functions, okay? And this is a key to understanding